Some partnerships just define an era. In Hollywood, where friendships can be as fleeting as a camera flash, some bonds feel like they're forged in something stronger than fame. For decades, the names Robert Redford and Paul Newman were inseparable. They were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. They were Hooker and Gondorf. On screen, they were magnetic, a perfect blend of charisma, wit, and that lightning-in-a-bottle chemistry every director dreams of. Their two films together aren't just classics. They're cultural touchstones that shaped the very idea of a Hollywood leading man. But off-screen, their story was quieter, deeper, and far more complex. It was a friendship built away from the spotlight, in the rolling hills of Connecticut, over shared values and a relentless, often hilarious series of practical jokes. It was a brotherhood that endured global stardom, family life, and the unstoppable passage of time. When Paul Newman passed away in 2008, Robert Redford, a man known for his thoughtful eloquence, gave a statement of profound and telling brevity. It spoke of a loss that was simply beyond words. And then, for years, he was mostly silent on the subject. That silence wasn't a lack of feeling, but a testament to its depth. It was a space held sacred for a friend who was, in his own words, a pillar of integrity. Their on-screen chemistry was legendary, forging a bond that seemed unbreakable. But for years, Robert Redford remained famously quiet about the true depth of his friendship with the late Paul Newman. Now, with the perspective of age, Redford is sharing what that friendship truly meant. What were the heartfelt, hilarious, and sometimes difficult truths that went far beyond the silver screen? In this video, we reveal the intimate details of an iconic friendship, as told by the man who lived it. To understand the weight of their friendship, you have to go back to 1968. Hollywood was in transition, the old studio system was crumbling, and a new breed of actor was redefining what it meant to be a star. And sitting right at the top? Paul Newman. He wasn't just a movie star, he was an institution. With those piercing blue eyes, a string of iconic roles in films like The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke, and an Oscar nomination under his belt, Newman was Hollywood royalty. He was the man every studio wanted. On the other end of the spectrum was Robert Redford. He was the golden-haired guy from California. Handsome, talented, but still an up-and-comer. He'd found success on Broadway in Barefoot in the Park, and had a few film roles, but he was nowhere near Newman's level. He was still fighting against being typecast as just another pretty face. The project that would bring them together was a uniquely brilliant script by William Goldman, originally called The Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. The director, George E. Roy Hill, knew Newman from their early days in live TV and had a vision. The studio, 20th Century Fox, just saw dollar signs. They wanted two massive stars. Newman was on board, but the role of the Sundance Kid was a problem. They tossed around names like Steve McQueen and Marlon Brando, wanting a star of equal stature. But George Roy Hill and Paul Newman saw something different. Newman was first considered for Sundance, a cool, reserved character he'd played before. But Hill, knowing the real fun-loving, mischievous Paul Newman, insisted he was the perfect Butch Cassidy. And for the Sundance Kid? Newman's wife, Joanne Woodward, had a suggestion: that promising young actor, Robert Redford. When Redford came in, the chemistry was instant, but the studio still wasn't sold. They saw a risk, not a star. This is where the foundation of their friendship was truly laid. Paul Newman, the established king of Hollywood, went to bat for the newcomer. He didn't just suggest Redford, he fought for him, putting his own considerable weight behind the casting. Redford himself recalled it years later, stating, "When the studio didn't want me for the film, he stood up for me. I don't know how many people would have done that." Newman's reasoning was simple and said everything about his character. He just wanted to work with a good actor. It wasn't about fame, it was about the craft. In that single act of generosity, a bond was forged before a single frame of film was shot. Redford would never forget it. The studio finally gave in, flipping the title to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. History was about to be made, not just in movies, but in the private lives of two men who had just found a mutual respect that would become the cornerstone of their relationship. The success of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was explosive. The film was a critical and commercial juggernaut, turning Robert Redford into a major star overnight and cementing Paul Newman's status as a legend. The on-screen duo became a cultural phenomenon. Their easy banter and sheer charisma captured the world's imagination. But for Redford and Newman, the best thing to come from the film wasn't the fame or the money. It was finding a genuine friendship. As Redford later explained, as the film went on, we both pushed aside our movie personas and just became friends. This wasn't a friendship for the cameras. It was the real deal. Looking to escape the Hollywood glare, Redford moved his family to Westport, Connecticut, a quiet town that offered a sense of normalcy. As fate would have it, this put him just a mile down the road from the sprawling home of Paul Newman and his wife, Joanne Woodward. Suddenly, they weren't just colleagues, they were neighbors. This proximity let their friendship flourish away from film sets. It was in Connecticut that they built the bond the world only glimpsed on screen. Their time together wasn't spent at lavish parties. It was spent drinking beer, talking, and just enjoying each other's company. It was here that Redford got to know the real Paul Newman, a man completely different from his cool, composed screen image. Redford recalled that while the actor Paul Newman was a picture of confidence, the man Paul Newman was a nervous, chatty person who was always chewing his fingernails. He was also a man who loved to laugh, especially at his own terrible jokes. Redford remembered this with affection, saying, "Paul really likes to have fun and he loves to laugh, and he really especially loves to laugh at his own jokes. And some of them are just really awful." He said the laughter was so infectious you'd just get caught up in Newman's sheer joy. Their friendship was built on this shared humor and a deeper set of shared values. Both were family men, devoted to their wives and kids. They both had a healthy skepticism of their own fame and the Hollywood machine. They found common ground in their desire for privacy and their commitment to using their platform for good. Redford reflected on this, saying, "What we found out over time was that the things that made us friends were a lot to do with values." This was the era where their bond became a true brotherhood. It was no longer about a movie. It was about shared lives, shared principles, and, most famously, a shared love for elaborate, legendary pranks. If their friendship was built on respect, the house was built with relentless, ingenious humor. The prank wars between Redford and Newman are Hollywood legend, not just because they were funny, but because they revealed the truth of their relationship, a playful, competitive, and deeply affectionate rivalry. The most famous prank started with a car. Paul Newman was a passionate race car driver, an obsession that began after Redford, a car enthusiast himself, let Newman drive his Porsche. Newman was instantly hooked and talked about it endlessly. As Redford amusingly recalled, "Paul drove me crazy talking about racing all of the time. It just bored me to tears." Fed up, Redford planned the perfect gag for Newman's 50th birthday. He found a completely destroyed, trashed Porsche at a junkyard. He had it wrapped in paper, put a giant ribbon on it, and delivered it to Newman's back porch. Redford waited for a response. A week went by. Nothing. 2 weeks. Silence. Then, one day, Redford returned to his own rented house to find a massive, impossibly heavy crate in his living room, one that had dented the floor. He pried it open and found what was left of the Porsche. Newman had taken the wrecked car, had it compacted into a perfect dense cube of twisted metal, and delivered it as a return gift. But Redford wasn't done. He had the cube transported to a sculptor and commissioned him to turn the ugly metal block into an even uglier piece of abstract garden art. Once it was finished, he hired a tow truck and had the sculpture secretly installed in the middle of Paul Newman's perfectly manicured garden. The punchline? The detail that truly captures their unique bond? Absolutely nothing happened next. As Redford confirmed years later, to this day, neither of us had ever spoken about it, never acknowledged it. The silence was the joke. To talk about it would have ruined it. Their pranks were a private language, a testament to an understanding that ran so deep it needed no explanation. 4 years after Butch Cassidy, the call came to reunite the legendary pair. The film was The Sting, another brilliant script that promised to recapture the magic. Once again directed by George Roy Hill, it was a natural fit. As Redford said, The Sting just sort of fell into place naturally. The film was an even bigger triumph than their first, winning 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The on-screen chemistry was as powerful as ever, with Newman as the wise grifter Henry Gondorff and Redford as the ambitious con man Johnny Hooker. Their dynamic had evolved, mirroring their real lives. Newman was now the elder statesman, and Redford was a full-blown superstar, earning his first and only Best Actor Oscar nomination for the role. The film Revitalize. These stories offer just a glimpse into one of Hollywood's most legendary friendships. If you're fascinated by the golden age of cinema and the real stories behind the stars, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have many more tales from this iconic era coming your way. What's your favorite scene from Butch Cassidy or The Sting? Let us know in the comments below. After the massive success of The Sting, the world wanted more. A Newman-Redford film was a global event. Studios were ready to offer almost anything to get them back together. So why did Hollywood's most beloved duo only ever make 2 films together? The answer comes down to their integrity and their profound respect for what they had created. Both men knew they had captured magic, and they were fiercely protective of it. The idea of churning out sequels for a paycheck was horrifying to them. They weren't interested in becoming a gimmick. For years, they actively searched for a third project. Director George Roy Hill joined them, and the trio looked at countless scripts for over a decade, but nothing ever felt right. Paul Newman himself said it simply: "There are no good scripts out there. We haven't been able to find one that we liked enough for the 3 of us to be in it together." The bar they had set was just too high. As the years passed, their careers also diverged. Redford focused on directing, winning an Oscar for Ordinary People, and poured his energy into creating the Sundance Institute. Newman focused on his racing career and his incredible philanthropic work with the Newman Zone brand. Their lives were full, and finding a project that aligned became increasingly difficult. There was one last poignant attempt. In the 2000s, Redford got the film rights to Bill Bryson's memoir, A Walk in the Woods. The story of 2 old friends hiking the Appalachian Trail seemed like the perfect, bittersweet final chapter for their on-screen partnership. Redford started developing the script with Newman in mind. For a moment, it seemed like it might happen. But by this time, Newman's health was failing as he privately battled lung cancer. He felt he could no longer handle the physical demands of the role and had to drop out. The opportunity was lost forever. Redford eventually made the film in 2015 with Nick Nolte in the role meant for his dear friend. Perhaps it was for the best. The legacy of their partnership rests on a quality and authenticity they wisely chose to preserve. Friendships, like all living things, evolve. They have seasons of intense closeness and periods where distance naturally settles in. The bond between Robert Redford and Paul Newman was no different. After the whirlwind of their 2 films and their early days as neighbors, their lives, full of separate careers and growing families, began to follow different paths. It wasn't a dramatic falling out. There was no big argument. Instead, it was a quiet, gradual drifting that happens in many lifelong friendships. Redford himself acknowledged this subtle, organic shift. Their connection never relied on constant communication. They didn't need to see each other all the time to know their bond was solid. Redford noted that their relationship didn't need a lot of words. They might go for long stretches without seeing each other, but when they did, it was as if no time had passed. They continued to support each other's work from afar, showing up at events for one another, and they served a crucial role for each other, keeping each other humble. In a world that saw them as icons, they were each other's reality check. Redford explained, "Whatever success one of us would have, the other would knock it down. If you're in a position of being viewed iconically, You'd better have a mechanism to take yourself down to keep the balance. I think we did that for each other. This drifting wasn't a sign of a weakening friendship, but a testament to its strength. Their bond didn't need constant maintenance. It just was. A quiet certainty in a loud and uncertain world. And that quiet understanding would become especially poignant in the final years of Newman's life. As the 2000s wore on, Paul Newman began to retreat from public life. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, a battle he fought privately, with the same dignity that defined his entire life. Redford visited his friend as much as he could, but as Newman's illness advanced, he became more reclusive, wanting only his closest family by his side. It wasn't a rejection of friendship. It was a man of immense pride who didn't want his friends to see him in decline. Their contact shifted to phone calls, which Redford admitted were incredibly difficult as he could hear his old friend's voice fading. In their last conversation, they didn't talk about the illness. They didn't have to. Redford said, "I knew what the deal was and he knew what the deal was and we didn't talk about it." Instead, they talked about politics and the state of the world, a final connection that honored the intellectual respect they always had for one another. When Paul Newman passed away on September 26, 2008, the world mourned. Tributes poured in. But from his closest friend, Robert Redford, came a statement that was stunningly, powerfully brief. It read, "There is a point where feelings go beyond words. I have lost a real friend. My life and this country is better for his being in it." That was it. In the years that followed, Redford remained conspicuously quiet. No tearful interviews, no tribute documentaries. To some, this silence seemed strange. But for those who understood their bond, it was the ultimate act of respect. It wasn't an absence of grief, it was reverence. Redford was honoring the privacy that both he and Newman valued so deeply. The silence was a protective shield around something sacred, a final unspoken prank on a world that thought it knew them, insisting the most important parts of their story belonged only to them. For over a decade, Robert Redford let that brief, powerful statement stand. He let the meaning of their friendship mature in the quiet, away from public analysis. But as time has passed, something has shifted. Now, at 89, Redford has begun to open up, not with a flood of revelations, but with the quiet, considered grace of a man looking back on a life profoundly shaped by another. In more recent reflections, he has started to share the details of what their friendship truly meant. He even admitted that one reason he stayed silent was a fear he couldn't do their bond justice. How do you summarize a man who was more than a friend, who was an anchor, a mirror, a brother? What Redford speaks of now is the enduring legacy Newman left him, a legacy not of fame but of character. He often returns to the lesson of humility. "Well, he was a pretty big deal, and he was always humble," Redford said. He talks about the lessons in compassion and generosity Newman taught him through his actions, not his words. Redford emphasizes that Newman's heroism wasn't in the roles he played, but in the life he lived. He points to Newman's philanthropic work, especially the hole-in-the-wall gang camps for seriously ill children, as the ultimate expression of his character. Redford said, "Some people mistake actors for heroes because of the parts we play, but there's no mistake here. In a real way, Paul Newman has improved the lives of hundreds of thousands of children and their families." He also speaks now with a palpable gratitude, acknowledging the immense impact Newman had on his career by fighting for him to be cast in Butch Cassidy. This isn't about revealing secrets. It seems to come from a place of finality, a desire to ensure his friend is remembered for who he truly was. It's a man in the last chapter of his own life making sure their friendship is defined not just by two iconic films, but by the quiet integrity, infectious laughter, and unwavering loyalty that bound them together. In Redford's own words, it was a friendship that still exists even though he's not with us anymore. The story of Robert Redford and Paul Newman is more than just a Hollywood tale. It's a timeless narrative about the power of friendship. It's a story of two men who found in each other a partner in crime, a friendly rival, a trusted confidant, and a brother. Their on-screen magic wasn't an illusion. It was the visible proof of a deep and authentic connection. They were two sides of the same golden coin, one cool and sardonic, the other warm and mischievous, and together they were perfect. Their legacy isn't just in the frames of Butch Cassidy or The Sting. It's in the laughter that echoed through the Connecticut hills. It's in the silent, hilarious war of pranks. It's in the millions of dollars Newman's philanthropy has given to those in need, and in the generations of filmmakers nurtured by Redford's Sundance Institute. They shared a belief that if you're lucky enough to have success, you have a responsibility to put something back into the world. Robert Redford's recent reflections are a final tribute, a closing chapter, written with the wisdom of age and the clarity of loss. His initial silence after Newman's death was a testament to a grief words couldn't contain. His words now are a gift, a final sharing of a story that has inspired millions. In the end, their friendship doesn't need a movie to be remembered. It was lived, and in living it, they gave us a story of loyalty, integrity, and fun that will endure long after the screen fades to black. The bond between Robert Redford and Paul Newman is a powerful reminder of what true friendship looks like. What story from Hollywood's golden age inspires you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this in-depth look into their lives, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories that explore the legacies of cinematic icons. Thank you for watching.